On this episode of Expletive, my zombie VCU won't run, we go over one potential parameter that could keep your zombie from running on your workbench, especially for our snoobs. So you hooked up your ground and you hooked up the Holy Trinity, and your zombie just will not go from the off mode to the run mode. Why is that? Well, I feel a little bit guilty for not sharing this with you in much earlier videos. This is the whole point of why I'm making these videos, is to share things with you as they come across my mind as a noob myself. And I totally missed this parameter and I totally forgot to share it with you. I just assumed, I guess, everybody would know it. So let's do a demo of why it won't start.
Alright, so the first thing we do is we check to see if we have our network, and we do. We have Fairy Link, and it wants us to disconnect, which means it's connected. I like to make a shortcut for whatever browser you're using, and on this dedicated laptop or computer or what have you, when I click it, I go right into the ZombieVerter software web interface to the Zombie. Okay, so here we are in the software. The hardware is all taken care of. It is all hooked up. So now let's jump down to spot values. We'll remember to put our auto refresh on and click the refresh once. Now we're in auto refresh. Okay, so I'm going to turn on the ignition and I'm going to press the start button. And my op mode changes to something called pre-charge. And then it says, I guess that's short for pre-charge failed. Okay. Well, what's going on here? Why won't it go to run? So, in order to understand what is happening here, we need to take a step back. So let's do that. If we think of this interface into and split it into two, there's parameters, and parameters are what we enter, and this is our input to the system. And then there's spot values, and this is what the system reports back out to us. So as far as reporting stuff to us, we've covered already things like the first item on the list, which is version. That tells us what version we're on. And we've been obsessed with this op mode, operational mode, and we've watched it in prior videos go from off to run and back to off. We also played with the direction of forward and reverse, but there are other things in here, and now we're noticing there's another operation mode. So we have this pre-charge fail, and prior to that we saw pre-charge. But I want to draw your attention to this other feedback parameter that says last error. Now this, in our case, maybe last error is a last error, if you will, but I think more appropriately this would be called last message or previous status or last known status. Like, what happened last? What did we try and what happened last? It's not always necessarily going to be bad or technically an error, but that's just me nitpicking. Then we also have another feedback parameter here that says status, and this status here says UDC below UDCSW. Okay, well, let's learn about this. Alright, so let's jump back to parameters, and I'm going to tell you what is preventing us from going to run mode and why. Under parameters, if we scroll down to contactor control, okay, under contactor control we have something that says UDCSW, and if we jump to spot values, sorry I'm going back and forth, but I want to show you how this correlates. There is something that says UDC below UDCSW. Okay, now what you can do in this interface is kind of cheat, and if you do a Control F for find and you type UDCSW, it's going to show you that, hey, on this page, in this web interface, I found that particular thing, whatever it may be, we don't know, twice. So I found it up here under parameters. I'll just scroll up so you can see that we're indeed under parameters, and we are. I found it under parameters, and then the second time, whoops, I'm gonna go to the second time for me. I guess it's skipping to the second one, it's just not doing my page. So it's right here, UDCSW is right there. Will it go to it now? That's interesting. I don't know if it's case sensitive, UDCSW. But what I'm trying to tell you is that it's the status is telling us something about UDCSW, and then we know that's a parameter that we can set, we can configure under parameters. So we're going to go back to the parameters where it says this whole thing, UDCSW. And let me be honest with you. I love this interface, don't get me wrong, but the only beef I have with it is these parameter names. Okay? I feel that if your label needs a label, or if your attribute name needs an explanation, it's not a good attribute name. So what is this UDCSW? So UDC, that's pronounced battery voltage, okay? It's battery direct current. DC is direct current. U is either from Latin or German, but that, I pronounce that as battery voltage, and this SW, Damien referred to us as switch or switched. Okay, so this means battery voltage, all right? If we look on the top of the parameters, I just want to show you the header. So the column headings are name, value, the unit that it's in, minimum value, maximum potential value, and the default setting. Okay, that tells us something. That's really great. So let's go to our UDCSW. So under contactor control, it's V for volts. The minimum it can be is 0. The maximum it could be 1,000 volts, and the default value is 330. And Zombie comes to us out of the box set to the minimum voltage of 330. So this is telling Zombie the minimum voltage that you need to see from the battery is 330 volts in order to do whatever next. Well, we are in a workbench setting. There is no high voltage battery pack connected to our ZombieVerter, so we will never reach this. We will never reach 330. All right, so this is what's preventing us from going into run mode. But as you can see, we can set it to 0, we can set it to nothing. So let's try that. Let's go in here. So we can make this setting be 0, which is the minimum value allowed. So let's do 0. Damien instructs us to always hit enter after we input a new parameter. So I just hit enter. But that won't be saved yet. So we have to click on commands, save parameters to flash. And I like to click on parameters and see that there's a message that says parameters were stored, and they were. Okay, so now let's jump back down to spot values, and we're going to try going into start mode again. So we are in refresh still. Okay, so I just turned it off. I'm going to turn it on, hit start, and look at that. We just went into run mode. So it was indeed that setting that was holding us back. And to prove my point, let's go back and let's go ahead and turn off our ignition. So I'm going to turn off the ignition. Our op mode went to off. You see that? And now what we're going to do, I hope this is helping you understand this interface a little bit. So contactor control is talking about your negative contactor and what they call the main contactor, which is your positive contactor. And this value here says when the battery voltage that I'm sensing as the VCU, when this is below this setting, that means we haven't pre-charged our inverter capacitor yet. So don't go into run mode. So here we're going to change this to a 1. Okay, so we're going to just set this to 1 volt. Okay, we have no battery pack, so we will never even reach 1 volt. But let's test this. So save parameters to flash. Go to parameters, and here it is. If you're not sure if it's saved it or not, then say clear. Notice how the message went away. Go back to commands and write again. It's not going to hurt anything. So save parameters to flash means save my settings to memory. So I just clicked it, jumped down to parameters, and it wrote it. Okay, very good. Okay, now let's go to spot values. We're back to spot values. I'm going to turn off the auto refresh, turn it back on, click refresh once just to make sure it's happy. Now I'm going to click the ignition on. The op mode does not change to anything. That's fine. Now I'm going to click start. Look at that. The computer, the VCU, when you click on the start button, it goes into pre-charge. It tries to pre-charge. It's pre-charging the capacitor in our inverter just to 1 volt right now, and I'm sure there's a timeout on it, be it how many seconds, 1 second, 2 seconds, I don't know what it is. I should, but I haven't looked in the code. So it is telling us op mode, operational mode, PCH stands for pre-charge, and failed. Pre-charge failed. So just like the attributes which are abbreviated, the values or the messages are abbreviated as well. I wish they were spelled out. So I'll continue ranting about this. And I mean this as a compliment. Okay, again, I really like this interface, but we need to understand where it came from. This interface, I believe, was written by engineers for engineers, or reverse engineers, or developers, or programmers. Programmers wrote it for programmers to use. I'm not sure if they expected that 1,000 units of the Zombie will be sold to the general public. Sure, a lot of us are still engineers, programmers, but now it's getting popular with regular consumers. It's falling in the hands of consumers, knuckleheads like me, consumers like you, and I think maybe the time has come to improve these attribute names so they're spelled out, and lengthen these values of the messages so that we don't have to guess or ask what they mean. Again, I mean this as a compliment, okay? This is a great system. I'm just making suggestions, right? In the unlikely event that Mr. Johannes Hubner is watching this video and probably throwing things on his monitor screen and unsubscribing from my channel if he's even subscribed, I'm just making suggestions to see if we can make this a little bit user-friendly, let's say, right? I'm a people person.
What would you say you do here?
Well, look, I already told you. I deal with the goddamn customers so the engineers don't have to. I have people skills. I am good at dealing with people. Can't you understand that? What the hell is wrong with you people?
So now when we look further at the status, it makes sense. It is saying UDC, or battery voltage, below battery voltage that's preset or expected setting or something like that. I hope that is making sense and you know, helping you guys. So I'm going to turn off the ignition and let's see what happens here. Alright, it goes to off. Our last error was precharge. Our precharge failed. It never got up to 1 volt. Okay, let's go put that back to 0. And it doesn't ship preset to 0, although that would make us weekend warriors happy, but that would be actually a bad idea because it could potentially blow up our inverter capacitors. So it is set to 330. Now that might be a little bit too high for certain battery packs, but it's better that it never reaches it and never blows up your capacitor than it is set to 0 and allows no time to precharge the capacitor, and the inverter lets out black smoke. Okay, we're going to put this back down to 0. We're going to jump to commands. Actually, we're going to jump to parameters because it has our last message is okay. We're going to clear our last message. Go to commands. Write this setting. Go to parameters. See that it has been stored. Go to spot values. And we're going to turn on our auto refresh and say refresh. And now we want to see what happens with the last error and the status and all that. So we're going to turn on our ignition, and then we go to start and see, check this out. Operation mode went to run. We've seen that before. That's a good thing. And now we moved on to the next problem, the next bottleneck, you know, on the railroad tracks or whatever, as this train is rolling through the system. It's complaining now about the throttle. Well, that makes sense. We don't have throttle set up. Now, this throttle 1, 2, I don't think that means throttle 12. I think that might mean throttle 1 and throttle 2. Throttle channel 1 and throttle channel 2, because we use a kind of a 2-channel throttle for safety, for redundancy. And if we go up here to throttle, we'll notice that we have pot min, pot max, pot 2 min, pot 2 max. Okay, I'm going to gripe again, and this is just going to be a gripe video. We are told to use a Hall effect throttle pedal. I know nothing about nothing. Hall effect, I think it has something to do with magnetism, and pot is short for potentiometer. So we're not using potentiometer throttles. So I don't know if this is still correct or if this is a holdover from back in the day. So this is not, you know what I'm saying? And correct me if I'm wrong, and I don't mind sounding foolish. That's how I learned as well. So, but this is pot min, and essentially this is throttle 1 pot min, throttle 1 pot max, throttle 2 pot min, throttle 2 pot max. Doesn't mean you have 2 pedals. It means that one single pedal for safety has 2 channels of communication with the VCU. If something happens to one channel, well, if you're stopped, you know, and you got to get out of the way of a semi-truck or oncoming train because you're crossing the railroad tracks for some reason, well, that second channel is going to get you out of the train's way, out of the semi's way. Lorry, that's what I'm talking about, big truck coming your way. Guys, I've rambled, but I hope I helped you. There's a little bit of frustration in my voice because my laptop is just on its last on its last legs here. But thank you so much for listening. I think you probably stare at the white screen more than at me during this video. I may try to do that fancy picture-in-picture if I can pull it off. But again, I hope this helps you out. I wish I remembered to share this earlier. And we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.